Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another day of remote learning and another day of the Scarlet Stocking Spy, which we have been working with the past few days. We're going to be looking at pages 1 through 25 today, and we're also going to be talking about historical fiction. And I know you might be saying, oh, we talked about historical fiction before in terms of what it means to this book, but we're going to really be digging into that today. And taking a look at some of the things that are based on history or truth and fiction, okay? But just to review, we have our focus question, which is how did people's perspectives affect their actions during the American Revolution? And we've seen throughout all the texts that we've read that based on how you saw the revolution, whether you were a patriot or a loyalist, you had different views on what was going on, but also that leads into taking action for a lot of these colonists and for a lot of these British people that we were reading about in the previous texts. In this text, however, we have Maddie Rose, and Maddie Rose is a very specific perspective on the American Revolution, and all of her actions are directly related to how she feels about the war. Okay, and we kind of already discussed that Maddie Rose is in fact a patriot, so she is totally in favor of the Revolutionary War, and in case you have not yet finished reading this, she goes to great lengths to help the colonial army, okay? Our focus question, or I'm sorry, our content framing question is what is happening in the Scarlet Stocking Spy, which is the same as last lesson, but there's still a lot going on. And today we're looking at what's going on historically and what's going on fictionally, okay? So we're gonna be looking at pages 1 through 25, like I said. And really, I say 1 through 25, we start on page 4. I'm gonna read this page really quickly. In the fall of 1777, Philadelphia sat twitching like a nervous mouse. The British were going to attack, but no one knew where or when. Congress had fled inland to York. The Liberty Bell was secreted to Allentown. Folks thought the year resembled a hangman's gallows and took it as a bad sign. Now all the church bells were being removed to keep the British from melting them down into firearms. So this page basically gives you your background information, okay? It gives you your context if you want to bring back in some of that vocabulary we use to complete our opinion writing. It gives you the context, okay? But in giving you the context, it's giving you a lot of the historical parts of this text, okay? And it provides you with our setting, and our setting is purely historical. It's fact, it is true. That the setting is Philadelphia, which is a real place in Pennsylvania. And it's also 1777, which we know at that time would have been in the middle of the Revolutionary War. And we know that Philadelphia is in Pennsylvania, which was in fact one of the 13 original colonies. So the fact that Pennsylvania is a colony, and we know that the war was going on during 1777, that is all true, that is all historical, that is all fact, okay? And then it talks about Congress fleeing to York. The Liberty Bell was secreted to Allentown, and if you don't know, the Liberty Bell is is an actual thing. The Liberty Bell is one of the most famous landmarks in Philadelphia. It's located in its own building that a lot of people frequent. I have gone and seen it myself. I didn't go inside, but I just looked through the windows. There's big windows you can see because the line was super long, and I was crunched for time, so I didn't go in. But I wanted to check it out anyway, and I saw it through the window. But the Liberty Bell does exist. If you're ever in Philadelphia, I suggest getting there earlier than I did and getting online and checking it out for yourself. But then, so some of the other things here now, twist into the fictional part about the hangman's gallows, and that's all kind of figurative language for just saying that it was a very dark time in Philadelphia and the colonies with the threat of a British invasion coming, okay? And then also the fact that the bells, church bells, were being removed to keep the British from melting them down into firearms. That very well could be a fact as well. I personally never heard that before until I read this story, so I'm gonna hold off on it being on our chart, but also it's not the most important thing that I found, okay? So now if you keep reading, we get into some of the more fictional aspects of it, okay? And part of the fictional aspects is that we learn about our friend Maddie Rose, okay? Maddie Rose. There's no way for us to go back in history and track down if there was a girl named Maddie Rose who had a brother named Jonathan who was in the war, and who at night she would check out the ships and then hang the stockings accordingly. We have no idea, but Maddie Rose just becomes one of our characters, and I'll add Jonathan to that as well, because when you're reading historical fiction, most of the time the setting and a lot of the hardcore like events in terms of like we get into the Battle of Brandywine, and that actually was a battle that was not made up. But anything that happens between the characters is really the fictional part of the text, okay? So then it says, uncertainty settled over the British city like soot. Suspicion skulked through the cobblestone streets like hungry alley cats. Rumors multiplied like horseflies. Spies were everywhere, okay? Some spied for the British and were loyal to the king. Others spied for the Patriots, loyal to Washington's army. Still other spies were loyal to lining their own pockets. But one little spy moved through the streets unnoticed. That's where we learn about Maddie Rose. And she lived with her mother and her brother in the Leather Apron district next to the harbor, where the city's tradesfolk lived and worked in narrow brick houses. Okay? So then this part here, this conversation between two characters, between Maddie Rose and her mom and the whole scene in her house, this is strictly a fiction part, okay? So, the mother, and then any convos between characters. Okay, because what the author does is he has to build in the dialogue. He has to give you motivation to the characters and the characters' thoughts and the feelings to kind of match the historical aspect of the text. Now, the author could have written a completely different story by saying that Maddie Rose was a loyalist, but that doesn't make the story nearly as interesting. And we talked about this also, that perspective tends to lean towards what you see. So a lot of people that live in this country are on the side of the colonists and would be considered patriots in regards to the American Revolution. So most authors are going to write from a patriotic point of view, which is why the author makes Maddie Rose such a strong patriotic character who supports the colonial army, okay? But now, if you read carefully within that conversation, though, you can find real historical facts, okay? And things that are real. And the reason this is important, this is actually the last page I'm going to do for you, is because you guys are going to do the rest of the page on your own. You're going to reread these pages, and you're going to pull out all of the historical facts that you can. And I'm telling you right now that if you start on page 6 and you go all the way through to page 25, like you're asked today, you're going to find plenty of things. And I'm going to give you guys a really quick example of how you actually do that. Okay? So, I had this paragraph picked out. Here we go. Each morning before she went to sew seams for Mistress Ross. Again, so we're seeing that Maddie Rose has a job. It's a job that someone would have had at that time but again, it's with another fictional character, Mistress Ross. But that's not what I'm worried about right now. On Arch Street, Mattie Rose lowered a tea kettle over the hearth, then crushed dried raspberry leaves of Brew Liberty tea. The Liberty tea was the tea that was put out by the colonists, okay? Since the Tea Rebellion in Boston, drinking imported English tea would be considered disloyal, and they would be disloyal to the Patriots. So they focus on the fact that Patriots did not drink British tea. And they even mention what had happened in Boston, and we all know that the Boston Tea Party was a direct result of the tea tax imposed by King George, okay? Talks about just handing the teacup to her mother, and about how she looks a lot like her father because she has a strong chin. Again, that's all of the fictional stuff. Then we kind of get back into the historical stuff down here in the last paragraph. Mattie Rose knew her mother was remembering her father who had fallen at the Battle of Princeton last winter and lay with the others beneath the soil of New Jersey. Many men had gone to war. Even her brother Jonathan, who was only 15, had joined Washington's army to wear the blue coat. Okay, so it talks about Washington being the leader of the army. And it also talks about the Battle of Princeton. Again, that is a non-fiction, factual, I meant to say, part of this text, because the Battle of Princeton actually happened, and we all know that George Washington was the leader of the colonial army, okay? So what you're going to do is on the resulting pages, so really you guys are going from page 8, where you see her looking through the alley, all the way to page 25, which is here, which covers the Battle of Brandywine Creek, okay? And you guys are going to be creating a list of facts. There'll be a Word document for you to write down the facts. I'll give you guys some guidance there. And again, if you can't use the Word document, just look at it on your computer and then write them on paper. There's also going to be 2 questions on the Word document that I give you, and they are RACCS questions. The first question is, why might the setting be important to the Revolutionary War? Meaning, why would Philadelphia be an important place during the Revolutionary War? That's an inferencing question. I'm going to tell you right now, it's an inferencing question. You need to think of it on your own. And think about what Mattie Rose is doing and where Philadelphia is located to help you answer that question. And then the second is, describe the battle at Brandywine Creek and use at least 2 details from the text, okay? Those are going to be your 2 RACCS response questions that are on your Microsoft Word sheet, note-taking sheet, okay? Also, you guys are going to be getting a homework question. It's about a painting, and I will have the painting posted for you. You guys are just going to write a little bit of a reaction to what you see of that painting, okay? So you have your tracking facts from pages 6 to 25, and you're just writing down those facts, and then you have 2 RACCS response questions, and then you have a 3rd RACCS response question about the painting for homework, okay? That's it for today. Please make sure you guys are getting work in. A lot of people are still not submitting enough work. I'm hoping that if I make these questions on Google Classroom, you guys will answer them right there, okay? Until tomorrow, see ya.